All right, and we are live. Welcome to the first 2021 episode and our second episode of How We Would Build This. I'm Chris Schultz.
Hey, and I'm Ryan Wagonist. What's happening, y'all? Whew, feels good to be here.
Feels good to be here. We're streaming on several different platforms. We've got a great show today, great guest, Ben Montgomery from Premium Parking, who will bring in here in a few minutes. But Ryan, let's chat a little bit about what's going on in the world of technology and startups, and how's everything in your world?
Is there anything going on in tech this week? I wasn't sure if we wanted to talk about that or not.
Yeah,
I find it Nashville's interesting. I'm in Nashville. I know Chris, you're out in California still, but man, the online business world or the startup world, I think both of those things are kind of merging together here. Every week, really every month, I'm kind of seeing both of these worlds collide. I think there's something we can really learn from each other. But just with some of the censorship stuff that we've been looking at this week in the media, you being in Silicon Valley for quite a while, almost 20 years, what's your first and second kind of thoughts of what that looks like to change the landscape for this year? Is it as big as we're making it out to be, or do you feel like it is just hyped via social media?
Well, it depends on I don't know if it depends on your perspective or whether you want to call it censorship or you want to call it enforcing the terms of service.
That's a good one. IFTC.
It is interesting. I mean, clearly we're seeing, what technology, what our background, we've been doing this for many years, is now not just at the forefront of the economy, but it's at the forefront of of politics and democracy, and it's really interesting, and a little bit of a sort of a brave new world in terms of how we navigate it. But one thing's for certain is that the power of technology to connect people, to disseminate information, it's sort of, we're at the point where it's surpassed the power of TV. It's amazing how quickly the internet has evolved to this point. So I
find it interesting. Naval had a tweet this morning that says, "Not your platform, not your followers." And I'm just really interesting in the sense of, even with Ben coming on here in a minute, you're going to hear a cool story about their business and how they've just had awesome scale and growth from being kind of a brick and mortar cement, very kind of like, blue collar business. And, this year is a lot of people going to be looking for platforms that they can build for themselves. I think that is like one of the most untapped markets that will be emerging in the next 4 years, is these kind of really sovereignty based personal platforms. So I don't know. I think it's pushing people towards hopefully their kind of biggest expression online, in the sense of actually building the thing they want to build. So, I mean, that's why we're here, right? How do we build it? There's so many people with creative ideas that are building the next idea inside of the ecosystem of their business already. But then, like, what would you build? And now's an opportunity where you can do that if you want to. So, man, I love that tweet this morning. Not your platform, not your followers. And it's true. I think that's just a kind of a cool pathway to what's going to be happening, unfolding here. I think this year in tech. So I'm pumped, man. I love it. I don't see it as negative or positive. I see it as is, and it's opportunity. So
Well, one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people about is just where we are in the sort of the tech cycle or the startup cycle, but the broader economic cycle. These things tend to run in, let's call it 10-year increments, and boom economy and then a recession. There is no doubt that through the last year with COVID, we have hit a reset, certainly a reset in the way we all work and the way we all engage in the world and the way we collaborate, right? So for me, those times, when a lot of the so to speak, the rats are leaving the ship, the MBAs are all exiting out of San Francisco. It's the builders that come back. It's the builders that stay, and those people that have an idea, have something they're passionate about, are really truly focused on building a business. And those are the folks that I find most interesting. And I sort of have this feeling that we're at this beginning of another cycle, right? The last cycle, what we could do with our mobile technology and having this remote control for your life, and all of a sudden you could call a car, an Uber would show up, you can book a apartment on Airbnb, you could sort of do everything you could. Those companies are now obviously public and have gone through this economic cycle. What is going to happen, or what are people building that is sort of interesting right now? I think that's going to change our lives over the next 10 years. I think now is that very fertile sort of environment for starting new companies.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Let's see here. Where's Ben at? Hey, I was thinking, Chris, before Ben comes on, if there's anybody who's like watching now, one of the things that Chris and I do really well is, and I think we found this in the first episode we did, or even just in our conversations throughout the week, that a lot of founders or people who are building businesses online, it's really not about this like long-term solution to what they might feel is a problem they have. It's rather like in this moment, there's just this nudge that they need out of it, or maybe there's some insight, or maybe we may or may not have that, but we may. And so after we bring Ben on, there's going to be an opportunity for people who want to kind of come into the show and just ask kind of rapid fire questions. I want to preface that now before we bring in Ben, just to give people an opportunity to like, hey, hang tight if you have something that you're like itching to kind of process, or a question you have, or how would you build it, right? Like maybe you are building, or maybe you have an idea to build and you don't know what that next first step is. Like stay put. We want to help you with that. So that would be really, really cool.
Yeah, great point there, and we will bring you in if you have a comment in right now or at any time through the show, or a question for us or Ben. You can post it in the comments on whatever streaming platform you're watching, and Ariel, our producer, can put them up, and you'll see them on the screen. We also can invite you in, and we're going to be doing that at the end of the show. So as Ryan mentioned, we can do that. And let's just talk about the sort of the inspiration for the show, and sort of what we're trying to accomplish here. The name of the show is How We Would Build This. You may be familiar with Guy Raz, the podcast, How I Built This. So he is sort of, really doing interesting, deep dive interviews with founders and CEOs of people who have built great companies. And he's looking in a sort of retrospective, look back on that story. I think we're in a, look forward, how we would build this. This is sort of a brainstorm session, a mentor session, an opportunity to bounce off ideas. So if you want to join us for whatever our take or our nickels worth of free advice would be, don't feel like you have to have it fully fleshed out. That's sort of the whole point here, is a fun discussion about things that you may be thinking about building. So
yeah, come on. And like the advice I always kind of give is like first thought, best thought. So just like if you have something and you're like, it might not be worth it to ask, just like follow that first thought and go with it. That's always like stirred me really well in my journey of building. So yeah, that's my only thing I had to say about if you're watching or if you want to jump in, let's do it.
Okay, good. All right. Well, what do you say, Ryan? Ready to bring Ben in? All right.
Come on, Ben.
I'm going to add Ben to the stream and give you
a intro here. Hey, man.
Hey, Ben. Ben, let me give you a little intro here. Ben is the president of Premium Parking, an app dedicated to simplifying paid parking nationwide, offering frictionless user experience to drivers. We'll be bringing him on. We bring him on in a minute. We just brought him on to talk about the obstacles he's faced in building new technologies and into an established business model, parking, and bringing technology into that industry, and how his own experience can help other business owners anticipate mobile user growth in 2021. So welcome, Ben.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Ryan?
Hey Ben, how are you, man? Hey, real quick before we get started, is that a real burger behind you, or is that a fake burger? Because
that has been my Zoom Teams call icebreaker. My son made that in ceramics class. It was a Christmas. It's a hamburger. Yeah, it's a ceramic hamburger that he made.
okay, so I'm doing this like New Year's fast, and I'm like looking at that burger, thinking, "Woo!"
Yeah, it's
I'd eat that.
a good icebreaker. People are like, "What is that?" It works well. We spend a lot of time in front of the screen now.
Yeah,
we do. Ryan, you want to get us sort of kicked off here? I think you've got an idea for sort of where to open here.
Yeah, Ben, we were just gonna ask you a quick question. Tell us a story about premium parking. Like what? I love the question. Like tell us a story about premium parking.
Well, so the kind of the story, I mean, Premium's got a unique history. We're obviously a parking solutions provider. We started as a parking management company here in New Orleans, literally probably the worst time to start a business in New Orleans. The company was started 2 months before Katrina hit in 2005 and made it through that. I actually joined the company in 2008. And we ended up being pretty successful in just convincing people to let us run their parking lots. And then the way I tell the story is we naively decided to build an app for paying for parking. We kind of, Jim Yuji, who's the founder and CEO, said, "Hey, Ben, what if we built an app? We see some people starting to do this with parking." And I said, "I don't know, let's see." And I went and found a graphic designer and a developer and said, "Hey, how much to build an app?" And I think the original quote was $15,000. We spend quite a bit more than that nowadays, building software and designing software and implementing. But that was kind of the initial story. It's just kind of two naive people running parking lots. And we got into building parking software and now have built a tremendous amount of it. We have a system called Glide Parks that is the industry leading sort of gateless license plate based platform for running parking. And there's parking is an interesting industry. It's it's everywhere. You quickly realize you all have been aware of premium, but you don't see it until you're aware of it, and then you sort of see it everywhere. We have a lot of movies that have been filmed in New Orleans, for example. I remember there was a scene in Green Lantern where the aliens like chasing people down O'Keefe Street here. And you're just, I remember how they filmed it. They put a big, scaffolding on top of a garage. They rented out a whole parking lot, turned it into a market that they kind of crash into. And so you see in movies a lot of parking signs and things. But it's an interesting, very, like you said, sort of concrete, brick and mortar or maybe asphalt industry. And it's evolving pretty quickly. There's been a lot of sort of tech stuff happening in the parking space for years now.
Ben, we were talking about that a little bit in the pre-show. I think you probably heard us chatting. This last sort of tech cycle. I don't know that there's a hard stop and start, but you were certainly a part of it in maybe 10, 15 years ago. We all would have gone into a parking lot and sort of expected to pay at a machine or a parking meter or whatnot. But to what extent now do you think that the consumer expects, like, if I can't pay on my phone, I'm frustrated if I'm parking not in a premium lot somewhere else. Like the consumer mindset is just totally shifted in that I expect things to be tech enabled now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure in the parking, there's so many parking apps. That's one thing actually that we figured out. I mean, we grew this business in New Orleans. It's a huge tourist market, and we built this app, and it was like, we look at the transient, which is like daily, hourly, overnight parkers, and we had 98% still paying at a pay machine, and we're trying to drive adoption of this technology. And one of the things we did was we built what we call TextPay, which was an appless guest transaction. I think you're seeing, and it's kind of, you're seeing it in a lot of different ways. You search for food in Google Maps, and then all of a sudden you're checking out, into Chipotle, and you kind of don't realize maybe getting powered by some other thing. And so those are actually the more interesting things, I think, than the app. And we have an app for iOS and Android. And right now, so just for some data points for you, Chris, like in our platform right now, 80% of people, and we still have a lot of pay machines out there, are using their phone to pay for parking. Right? It's a pretty massive adoption compared to, again, I think the first year we had 1%, back in 2014. And so you've gone from 1% to 80%. We have some locations that you don't even offer a pay machine anymore, which I think is probably where we're headed. Is you just have a sign that says do this, and you use tech, whether it's QR or text or an app you have installed.
Yeah, it's an interesting market because I had never used premium parking until maybe like 3 months ago in Nashville, and that text pay, I'm telling you what, it was just like, I can be on board with this. I didn't have to go search for the app or download it. It was just so smooth and so slick. And so I just want to brag on that I had never used really any form of text pay in that space. But it is kind of one of those things where you pull up and you got the kids screaming in the car and you're like trying to get a meal and you're like, man, I got to park. I don't want to go figure this thing out. Like, what's an easy solution? So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think which actually the most interesting thing, talk about kind of COVID and some of the changing things is, we used to get people in the company say, hey, we got to do something with QR code. Like, that'll get people started in this appless transaction. And I would kind of usually just ask the question, when was the last time you used a QR code to them? And they'd say, and I would say the same thing. I said, I'm a pretty early adopter. I'm into tech. I follow it, and I hadn't used a QR code. But that has been probably one of those technologies that has really seen a massive acceleration during COVID. And we've seen it. We had launched we did end up building something for for QR code. We called it Camera Pay. And so you've got the fact that QR code is in the camera apps on phones. So that's grown like 1,000% literally since COVID. I mean, it was like literally not even registering from a transaction standpoint. Now we've got some locations, it's 25, 30% of the volume flowing that way. So
everybody sort of finally realized that their phone has a built-in QR code reader, right?
Yeah, you don't have to download a QR reader, right?
Yeah.
Use the camera app.
But it's true, like the touchless ordering in restaurants and that kind of thing, there has been adoption. And it's interesting because sometimes there's sort of like sleeper technologies that are sort of out there and the early adopters are excited about it, but it doesn't really go anywhere. But then you have this exogenous event like COVID, and all of a sudden, okay, here this technology that's been there all along, begins to be adopted like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I remember our CFO did like an MBA program and went to China, and he was like, oh yeah, everything's QR code over there. Some places you can't even use credit card. You have to use like QR code. And, we've all heard about that. And I don't know if we'll get there, but there's clearly been a shift in the sort of consciousness of using QR codes to start transactions in the U.S. For sure.
Ben, one of the things I wanted to get into a little bit here is you talk about Glide Park as a platform, and I know that we've had conversations about the potential to sort of allow others to build on it, and whether it's food ordering or restaurants or entertainment, once you park to get to a destination, we'll use like the French Quarter in New Orleans as an example. You know that a customer is there. They've parked in the French Quarter. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? There's sort of a level of engagement and relationship that you have the opportunity to sort of build on top of the platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, that's a shift that you've seen in the parking industry generally, right? As you've moved from just sort of an anonymous dip of a credit card to, you're putting a license plate in, you have a relationship, things are more, remembers your information, so it's a faster transaction. You get this account-based relationship. Parking's always been interesting because it's sort of the first thing you do when you arrive to a property or,
Yeah, come on.
or an area of the city. And so, yeah, we think there's some interesting stuff there. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe that's a good segue to some of the stuff that's been happening in the parking industry. You had probably the biggest news was you had SoftBank enter the parking management space, if you will. They bought two of the largest parking management companies in North America, actually.
Wow.
And they created this company called Reef Technology, which is sort of focused on dark kitchens. So they've got a little different idea, but I think a lot of people are sort of seeing, hey, parking is a key piece of this urban infrastructure, and how do we make it work better for other urban services, beyond just, parking your car and then walking into your building or going to the French Quarter. And so, we definitely see this real estate as sort of an opportunity to onboard into a digital platform. I think, whether it's selling tickets to, tourist, sites and things like that, or just having a better experience, like a building directory, putting you right into the building directory. One of the things we think about is we talk about upstream, midstream, and downstream. We're in New Orleans, and it's kind of an energy industry term, we think a lot of what you've seen happening in the parking space, the Park Whizzes and Spot Heroes, and some of these sort of aggregators of parking inventory. There's been a lot of work, what I call digitizing parking, right? Like getting these things on maps in the right places, with the right names, with the right rates, getting the ability to transact for that and get your information so you can actually seamlessly access it. And then you've got this middle piece, which is that transaction. So is it, an app? Is it a pay machine? Is it camera pay? Do you have a subscription? And so there's focus there. And then I think this next piece is, what happens after that transaction? Is there more sort of value we can create in that experience that makes the property enhanced and makes, helps people find what they're looking for? And so we've done some building directories. One easy thing we did was floor reminders. So what a great time to help somebody remember where they parked, like they do the transaction. And we just say, do you remember what floor you parked on? And we match it to the property. So all the floor names are the same. You click it. And then when you get your alert or you go back into the app, it tells you what floor you parked on. Simple thing. But I'm like, it's embarrassing. I'll go to like a parking RFP meeting, I'll park in the garage, and then like I'm wandering around with my other coworker. We're like, what floor do we park on? The client doesn't see us. Like we're like the parking guys. We can't remember floor.
Parking guys are lost. Oh no.
Yeah. Well, we got a question coming in from Jay, who's watching right now. This is an interesting question. Obviously, SoftBank, coming in, this is something, reminds me of when SoftBank started, investing a bunch in WeWork and we're running Launchpad. What does it mean for us? What you can see the question here on the screen, Ben. I'll let you.
So we have. What's interesting is we started out as a parking company that we'd walk into a client and say, we know a lot about parking. We can run any type of parking. And, we would run parking lots with attendants. We actually ran parking lots with what's called an honor box, where you like shove your money in these little slots, if you recall. And obviously pay machines, there's a whole debate historically about like pay display, pay by space. And then we've pretty much settled on pay by license plate at this point. Because of what's happening on the mobile side. And then we also ran gated facilities. When I mentioned glide parks, it's a gateless license plate based strategy. And so what's been interesting is we sort of were really broad in the type of stuff we did. And then as we got better at it, we actually got more focused, right? And so I think that's what we're seeing is we want to be world-class at gateless license plate-based parking operations, which for your viewers, it's basically just think about an on-street parking experience. You pull into a space, there's a sign that tells you what to do, and then you can walk up to a pay machine or use a mobile app and you pay for parking. It's really just essentially that workflow, but getting really in the weeds on that. How do you get really great compliance? How do you make it frictionless? How do you deal with complex situations like validation? So no, we think it's kind of good. There's a lot of noise and people are figuring out who's managing what, and they're rebranding and there's all this sort of stuff, and a lot of people are watching them, and we're certainly interested. I think it's exciting for the industry to have so much sort of money come into it, and then also focus and a lot of creativity. The team over there, I think, has got a pretty big vision for what the parking industry really could become, and there's going to be some value created there for sure. But no, we've actually just gotten more focused on what we're really, really good at, and we think it's a huge market. It's huge. I mean, they have 4,500 parking locations, and I'd be surprised if they have 15% of North American market share.
Wow!
So it's a really fragmented industry, and there's a handful of national players. There's 2 handfuls of regional players, and then everybody else are like small local operators for the most part.
And just for context, you guys are a national player at this point. How many markets is Premium in right now?
I'd still consider us a large regional, honestly.
Okay.
We're about 40 markets right now.
Yeah.
So we pretty much have it covered. We're up in right outside of Boston, I guess. I used to say we were in Connecticut, but we've actually just picked up something right outside of Boston, and then we're all the way in Hawaii. So we've got the whole U.S. covered at this point. But I think I'd say there's about 4 real, I think at this point, true national players, and then there's some younger, aggressive, scrappy companies that are growing quickly and are I'd consider still large regional players. So, but they tend to be, the parking industry, these larger players, the way they typically got to be large, where they ended up being roll-ups. Right? So they would slowly acquire, sort of local or regionals, and so they're, they tend to be a little. It's hard to sort of move those ships. Right. There's a lot of sort of partnerships and things. And, we think we can be very, very precise with what we're doing and get really good. We're in a very fortunate situation. All of our locations are running our own tech stack. And so we can sort of improve universally, where everybody else in the industry right now is piecing together multiple stacks. So they may use a gate arm system. They're using another mobile payment technology. They're using another accounting system. Maybe they're tied in with Spot Hero, another enforcement. So again, you sort of spend a lot of your time trying to get things to work. The analogy I use is I played a lot of basketball growing up, and you spend all your time trying not to dribble the basketball off your foot operationally, as opposed to kind of head up, playing the bigger game. And we're in a good spot to play the bigger game right now with Premium. Cool.
Let's put back up. There was a question coming in from Kip. Ariel and I are stepping on each other's toes, speaking of dribbling the basketball off our toes. About ownership, and this is interesting. This is sort of I wonder what SoftBank's approach is, but asset light, or not asset light, owning the lots. What does Premium do, to Kip's question?
So Premium does not own the lots. Premium is a parking solutions provider. We used to call ourselves a parking management company, but we obviously bring technology. And what's a little interesting is we're able to engage kind of in different levels. And so we've really been focusing on kind of what exactly are the deliverables and when do they make sense in different contexts. So no, we manage these, or lease them in some cases. And then in some of our newer accounts, we actually are really working with existing operating teams and letting them leverage glide parks and our expertise in gateless license plate, where they kind of keep their people in place, and then we're coming in and enabling the software and then training and supporting them. So no, we don't buy SoftBank. Just to comment on that, I think the assets they bought on the parking management space were management companies. Mm-hmm. So very similar to Premium. Though they did just announce, I think they raised another $700 million earlier this year, and I think that on top, I don't know if it's on top of that or in that, they have $300 million dedicated, I think, to sort of more real estate investments. But now Premium is focused on helping property owners maximize their assets from a customer service and revenue maximization. So,
on that topic, what in regards to businesses, is there what's the best way for a business who needs parking service to get a hold of you guys? Do you guys have a team they can reach out to? Is there
Yeah, so we've got a team of what we call market presidents spread out throughout the country, about 25 of them right now. And they're all parking professionals that have been in the industry generally for, a long time, understand it, but also really understand what we do. And they, it's amazing. It's kind of been one of the most, I've been doing this for 12 years now. And before it was all about like reaching out to property owners and trying to get them to listen to me and, take a meeting. And yesterday alone, we had 5 inbound leads on a website come in for people asking us to give them, a pitch on how they could use our solutions on their properties. And so we still do a lot of, sort of, cold calls and networking and old school B2B sales techniques. But, as we grow and more people see what we're doing and it's unique, hopefully we get more inbound as well. But, it's pretty easy that, you reach out, we follow up, we get the description of your property and what your problems are. And we either tell you, yeah, it's something we could do, add a lot of value for you. And then we send you a proposal or, hey, it's not really what we do, but, here's some other friends that we have in the parking industry. The parking industry is small. Like it's everywhere, but it's a pretty small industry. And we used to get together a couple times a year. We've done some virtual stuff, but we're looking forward. It's a pretty social group when they all get together. So that's fun, but it's been a while.
Ben, I got a couple more questions for you, but let me just a little interlude to encourage our audience. We are, when we wrap up with Ben, going to take questions or invite audience members in for sort of a quick fire round. So if you've got questions or if you want to participate, why don't you ping in the comments, and our producer Ariel or Lauren can send you a link and we can pull you in. Let's see. Oleg's got a question here. We can go to Oleg, and then I've got a follow-up that's similar to that. So why don't we jump in on Oleg's question?
Sure, Oleg. So he's asking, is Katrina the hardest thing or is COVID the hardest thing for business? I was not with the business when Katrina hit. I was in New Orleans, and I was actually working for the city at the time. I had a fellowship. It was right after I graduated from college. And I think they're very different. I mean, if you know what happened with Katrina, it was, if you're in New Orleans, it was very bizarre. It was the evacuation of a major American city for months at a time. You had a huge depletion of housing stock. And so it was just a very difficult environment to operate in. But at the same time, it was also when a lot of people were coming together. And there was a lot of civic pride and things happening. And we're in a different time right now where it's difficult to come together. And I've told our team, we just went through what I think without a doubt was the hardest year in the history of the parking industry. We had every single market, right, was impacted. In April, revenues went down 90%, essentially, the end of March, beginning of April, almost immediately. We're still, in most cases, sub 50%, around 50% of sort of same store revenue. So, I think it's really, I think COVID's very difficult for parking. I mean, parking is, and it's difficult for cities. I mean, it's such an interesting thing that's happened in the last 10 months. I went to architecture school. And so, we spent lots of time studying cities and urban planning. And it was really we were in sort of this amazing moment coming into COVID where cities were booming. We had this massive reurbanization. We had all these services popping up, and we were using technology to coordinate things, which was making cities more livable. And then all of a sudden, we've got to get away from each other, is what happens. And so this is a pretty tough moment for the parking industry, but we were well positioned. From a BD standpoint, we've done very well. We've almost doubled in size, and so we think we're well positioned as we come back. And obviously, our stuff's inherently touchless. I think touchless has been a little bit overblown. As you look at the data, I think it's a lot more about people kind of breathing on each other, which is sort of the major issue that we're having from a spread standpoint. We're optimistic. We're vaccinating down here in Louisiana. We're accelerating, if you look at the graph, exponentially. So hopefully that can continue, and we will get out of this thing.
So let me ask a follow up to that. I'm just curious, and this is obviously a little bit of blue sky thinking here because none of us have a crystal ball. But as a jumping off point, downtowns, CBDs, people were really coming back downtown. People were live, work, play back downtown. I'm curious if you have ideas around what from more from an urban planning perspective, but certainly parking is a key element there, as is office space, as is living. Where you think things post-COVID, when we get back to the new normal, won't go back to exactly what it was, but offices may be different. You may have more of a flexible workplace where people can work from home and can convene in an office. I've heard, a lot of talk, I'm sure in New Orleans, this is probably a likely scenario of, the roaring 20s when we've all got this pent up desire to get back together and go to Mardi Gras and hang out and see each other and go to concerts and that kind of thing, with an expectation of sort of a booming, economy for physical, getting people back together kind of thing. Do you have any signals or, ideas, sort of where do you think we're all headed, post-COVID here?
I think when you look at it, like, there's some, we've picked up some traits that I think are going to be really efficient going forward. I mean, I used to travel, probably every other week, going to meet with clients. I am traveling this week, so that's great to be back out traveling a little bit. But at the same time, I was, during COVID, I would, meet with somebody in Philly, and then I'd meet with somebody in Miami, and then someone in Nashville. And it was really, efficient from a cost standpoint and from a time standpoint. And so I don't think that's going to go away. That said, I do think people like to travel. I think people like to develop real relationships in person. And there's certainly, while video is great and, the quality of this conversation is really strong, it's different than us like sharing a glass of wine and me pouring you, a glass. And there's sort of a different level of connection. So, no, I think cities are going to be okay. I think it's going to be interesting to see how long the office trend sort of holds and how many companies feel like they really can be virtual. We did early on. I remember we did this. We sort of, we're asking these questions like, is office space even going to come back? And we looked at it, and our office costs are about, I think it was like 10 to 15% of our payroll costs that are here in corporate, right? And so we sort of said, let's just think about this. Do we think that having sort of interactions in an office drive 10 to 15% more productivity and creativity and all the sort of things that you're looking from your team? And we thought that wasn't a crazy, thing to think about. That easily be getting 10% more creativity, 10% more productivity by having some in-person interaction, some real whiteboarding, things like that. And so I think it's going to come back. I think you're going to see more flexibility. I think business travel is going to be, I think it's going to be impacted. but it may get made up by leisure travel because people can now work from anywhere. And so, and so maybe, that those, one day slogs, to a city and back where you're just exhausted when you get home, maybe those become vacations and you spend it working. And, we fill that gap for hotels and flights with more fun travel than we were before. But again, I think cities, one of the cool trends I love to see is there was always this little thing called Parking Day. It was like a riff on parking. It was like, we should be using this space in cities for parks, not parking. And it was like park, and then ing was in parentheses. And, you've seen this. I was like, you've seen Tesla and Bitcoin explode, but you've seen the adoption of parklets actually explode too. Because, people, these restaurants and bars and things were looking around, and there's no more space in the city, but they had this, big, 22 foot by, 9 foot piece of real estate right in front of their building that was used for one car. Right. And so you've seen that. New Orleans has gotten on the train a little bit slower than I'd wish, but, that's been an interesting trend. And I think we hopefully are going to use this as something we can build on and get better streets, better urban environments out of it. So I'm so bullish on cities. I think people love to come together. I think it's amazing what we've done. I mean, if you think about the fact that we have a vaccine right now that, we're maybe disappointed with the speed of going out, but this is pretty impressive. Yeah. There's I saw this graph of how long it took with other major epidemics and things that happened and how long it took us to develop a vaccine. And this is an order of magnitude shorter. And so there's some really wonderful things that, there's some silver linings here for sure.
All right. Well, let's take a last question here from Ariel in the audience. Speaking of Elon Musk and Tesla, electric vehicles, I'm sure that's a key component and growing component of folks who are parking.
Yeah. So we do. So we've got two interesting products that are enabled with the gateless strategy. One is called a star space. So this is like if you're in a rush, we got a space for you sort of thing. Ground floor or, right on the corner in the parking lot. And we basically use those same workflows to create EV charging spaces. And so we've got those in a couple places, but I think you're going to see a lot more of them in the future. I think you're going to see, it's funny, I go to these parking conventions, and I can tell you 3 years ago, we were all shaking in our boots with autonomous vehicles. The parking industry, you saw these articles, the parking industry's dead. And, we had people coming from University of Michigan and talking to us about autonomous vehicles. And one of the talks was, you felt this sea change where it was kind of becoming reality that we weren't going to see these automated vehicles in the very, very short time. I do think that I'm seeing a sea change literally in the last 6 months, I'd say, where EV, while it was pretty big in California, they had some new mandates and things with the percent of spaces that need to be able to charge. You're seeing this where I think there's going to be real sort of market-driven decisions being made where you've got, but it's going to depend on the facility. Like a Class A office garage, does it need an bunch of EV charging stations? Maybe not, right? Because most people that are going there have their cars at their house. They're charging them overnight. Yeah. But a garage that services a hotel or residential, those are going to be much more market-driven use cases that somebody would want to buy, charging from you in the parking facility. Again, the autonomous stuff is, I think, still incredibly interesting and is going to unlock incredible amount of value in our economy. I think where you're going to see it first, though, and it's going to be interesting to see how this impacts urbanization, Chris, and some travel as well. I think you're going to see a trip from New Orleans to Houston. I'll usually fly. There's tons of flights, direct flights, but it's only a 5-hour drive, right? And once I get on I-10, right, if I could just click it into Super Cruise and then do the podcast with you, right, it becomes productive time again.
Yeah.
Does the amount of sort of short haul flight decision making get shifted? Does that urban commute become less onerous? The most expensive piece of a commute is the time you waste, right? And so if that time doesn't get wasted because you're in Super Cruise, does that drive the demand up and maybe sort of push suburban living, and suck some urbanization back out of the cities? I don't know. But I think that's what we're going to see first, is this exit to exit autonomy. It's a much easier equation on a highway or an interstate than, navigating Bourbon Street, right? With an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ben, it's been a pleasure having you join us. Do you want to give a quick shout out for where people can find or follow you in Premium Parking online?
Yeah, so premiumparking.com is the website. We're on, our marketing team does a great job. We're on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everywhere. And just reach out. My cell phone number is the contact number on the website B2B. So
gutsy.
Give me a call.
Oh, all right. There you go. You heard it here first. If you want to
I told marketing, I said, "You sure you want to do this?" I said, if there's a day when I can't answer all the inbound BD, business to business calls, that's the best day ever. Yeah. It's a good day.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And thank you very much. Good to see you today.
See you, brother.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Sort of hearing, about the tech enablement and sort of where things are going in the future there for Premium.
Man, follow SoftBank, huh? I mean, if they see it, they've got plenty of consultants sitting in a room figuring out what's next to make them a ton of money. So I find that interesting. And something I thought interesting, Chris, was, and this could, I was feeling it for myself, but then also for the audience, a lot of people in the online space, or even just his journey from, one city to really, I know he said regional, but they are national with like 240 sites, right? Or plus. He said the better we got at something, the more we focused. I think so many people early on are trying to niche down right away, versus getting really good at maybe something broader and then allowing that experience to niche down. So I don't know. Who's listening is like, man, I don't know what to like focus on first. I love that he said like we became really good at something and then we were able to actually focus in on a niche. So, which is a little bit more of a reverse engineering compared to like pick this and then focus in on that niche, right? And I thought that was really cool. How like it's more about like just kind of putting your work into the world and then allowing that thing to kind of drive you in the direction of what's next. So I don't know, when he said that really kind of was really cool. So I think seeing that as a pain point for a lot of people that are kind of in the space of building, it's just become really good at what you're doing.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that too, I've been having a lot of conversations with people running companies, running startups. We're all sort of, everything went out the window last year, right? And by the way, some businesses have crushed it and done really well. Doesn't mean it necessarily the year sucked for you, but I do think that we're in this situation where the landscape has changed, the world has changed. So just even if you're not a startup, or even if you're not sort of an early stage and trying to think about what to build, but you're an existing company and you're saying, okay, now that the landscape has changed, the world has changed, where do I pivot? I think that like running, it's the same thing, running experiments, create a hypothesis, test, iterate, let the market, sort of pull you into that niche, like you're saying, Ryan. You don't have to, it's the same thing as, it's not necessarily starting over, but the same mindset of that sort of open mind of, let me explore what's going on. And okay, well, good. Well, I'm not sure. I'm watching our Lauren and Ariel, and sort of we may have somebody else, a guest. We may have Kip to bring in. If so, Ariel and Lauren, if you can make sure anybody has a link into the studio. Otherwise, we can do it again. We're trying to make this show. If anybody remembers Car Talk, the old NPR show, Click and Clack, we want to make this sort of a podcast version of a call-in talk show. So please make it as interactive as possible. If you're watching and you want to come in and you want to join us on screen, you're invited. We've got to figure out the right method so that it's fluid in terms of getting people in here, and I guess we will. But please join us. We're very open.
Yeah, they'll be coming. It's like just we were talking about, like, hurry up and fail. Yeah, man. So hurry up and fail by joining our show.
Right. There's a question from Jay. How long do you give an experiment before you either double down or pull the plug? What would you say to that, Ryan?
Ooh, double down or pull the plug. Man, that is such an interesting question, because I think that comes down to a few things. What I have this obsession with, like, how things are started. I think every business, in a sense, starts with a subtlety of fear. Like, you're trying to get away from, like, maybe a 9-to-5, or maybe you're trying to, like, maybe you left your startup to get to. I hope people aren't doing this, but I have seen it often. It's like, to, hey, example this week, right? It's like Parler kind of being kicked out of the social media space. Like, there's a little bit of a threat there. I don't necessarily buy into the total reason of why they were kicked off. I think there's a little bit of, like, we just don't want the space more crowded with people, not in totality, but just a little bit, right? And so I think it all begins with, like, why did you start, right? If you started it, and you did some market research and market matching, and you've had one or two people adopt, and you've really kind of flushed it out in person, then I think always double down. But that question always comes down to me of just a little bit more of, like, a self-worth question. Do I double down on myself? Do I pull the plug on myself? And so I always look at questions as, like, a first person, and then I attach it to, like, the business I'm building. 'Cause I think, like, it's always kind of like that question you're asking is really, like, what are you asking yourself? And then what is the effects of that answer on your business? So yeah, I love to get really raw and just say, like, where are you not doubling down on yourself, or are you trying to pull the plug on yourself? And that's just for me, it's a self-worth issue when it comes to founders or online entrepreneurs. That's not uncommon question, but yeah, I think if you love what you're doing and you're serving people and you're able to make an income, which I think is also equally valuable, because you got to feed kids and stuff. Well, unless you don't have any, then keep going, man. But for me, it's like, if I ever get to that moment where I feel that, then I know I probably didn't start it in the best energy, or I'm trying to create out of scarcity. So that's kind of my personal perspective. Yeah. When that question emerges, it's a deeper rooted reason. Jay,
let me see if I can get this to. We'll see if Kip gets that link I just sent him. Okay. Let me weigh in on Jay's question there. Jay, one of the experiments, a way to sort of validate, I always think, is focus on your customers. If you have any adoption, right? If you're trying something, focus on your customers who, if it went away, if whatever you're doing stopped, if you pulled the plug and you said, I'm not going to move forward, they would be pissed, right? They would be like, here's a good example. StreamYard, the platform that we're using, I did a lot of research sort of finding this. StreamYard got acquired recently, and I was worried that they're going to shut down the product, which often happens after acquisitions. If they did that, I would be pissed, right? Because it's a great platform. It's the best platform out there for streaming. So I actually think, and then you start honing in on those customers that are really utilizing your product. They're not just logging in because you're sending them prompts and you have to, you're reminding them or whatever, but they're truly utilizing it. I think those are really, sort of important signals if they're truly utilizing your product. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, good. I'm going to bring Kip in. Hey, Kip Lynch is joining us, and very, very excited to have you. Welcome, Kip.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ryan. Both y'all have been very informative already.
All right, good. And we're excited to, sort of get a chance to chat and work together. why don't you give us a sense of what you're working on with Miho, and we'll chat about it for a few minutes.
Well, sure. Thank you very much. So I am working on what I call a healthcare logistics and vendor relationship management platform to help try to improve the healthcare user experience for patients and their layperson caregivers. Their families and their family and friends who are helping them sort of navigate the healthcare system. And it's something I started working on several years ago, and then had a little bit of a hiatus just for personal, professional reasons, and got sidetracked. But I'm now, as you alluded to, working with you all. I'm very excited about it.
What is the tell the audience real quick why you built it? Because I know this comes back to something that we just talked about a second ago, Chris. Is like a lot of products. I think it could be split, but some products are just market fit, and you know how to code and make a brilliant product and bada bing. But I also love products that were created because of a personal problem or personal pain or something that was actually something in your life that you're like, man, I had this struggle. I needed a solution. So I'm going to see if I can help other people. So I'd love for you to tell real quick, like, what was that in your journey to like want to create this app?
Sure. Well, thank you. That's good. Good question. I am a physician. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm also a father and a son of a kind of an ill father. And so basically I've had it from various different perspectives. From those perspectives, I've seen the frustration people have just interfacing with the healthcare system. I mean, I think anybody who spent any time with, people more than just maybe a routine physical exam every year has experienced a lot of frustration with the inefficiencies of the healthcare system. So really, I was building it to solve a problem I have, A, and B, just as a reaction to all this. It just frustrates me to be part of a system that people kind of complain about, rightfully complain about. It's just an inefficient, complex, confusing, siloed ecosystem that people try to navigate. It's, buzzwords like platform and ecosystem I'm probably using incorrectly, but
no, that makes sense. And we kind of share that kindled spirit, because before my time, like in the entrepreneurial tech space, I was in the medicals field. And you're right, man. It's like there's just lack of listening or empathy towards the people that we're actually serving, but not just the people, but the families who actually have to take on the burden of the schedules, of the appointments, of what the doctor did or did not say, right? So it's really this ripple effect into homes, and sickness in general creates an not the best ripple effect initially. I think maybe long-term it can have some benefits to pulling people together. But tell us, like, what is it that you're building specifically, and if you have any questions of how you would build it, or how do you want to build it, or what the next phase is for your business, or how we can help.
Well, so the initial part of this business, I hope it will sort of expand, sort of alluded to things like that. Like once you get going, you become more focused on what the actual deliverables are. But the beginning, the first phase is basically going to be this app, and it's essentially going to have 7 or 8 different main functions. And the first 2 we're starting to work on are just appointments and tasks. And appointments, for example, are just, a prime example, I'm leaving to take Dad to the doctor in about 10 minutes. Ironically or appropriately. But the appointment feature is essentially like a calendar, but right now we're dealing with my dad, and he's got 2 or 3 appointments a week, and he has a little crew of caregivers, me, my sister, his former office manager, the home health nurse, and we're constantly texting back and forth about who can take him, who's going to take him, when the appointment is. And there are about 8 different text chains between various members of that little team. And, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, because we obviously all have text and we all have email, but I think having all of that in one HIPAA compliant space will be helpful. So that's appointments. Tasks, for example, is, pick up Dad's walker at the, medical supply store, go get Dad's prescription. So you'll be able to post that. I kind of think of it like a bulletin board almost. You'll post that task, and then you can see who's accepted it. So I post the task, and then I see, okay, my sister has accepted it, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. And then when she's done it, she can click on it and it's completed. So those are the first 2. I'd like to add sort of a medical records component where you can keep the documents you need. A big part of it is being able to navigate between the healthcare silos. And sort of my thesis is the patient and their crew of caregivers is the one common denominator between different healthcare silos. I think it's interoperability with Epic and Cerner and all that grows. That may be less of a need, but for now, I think that's important.
Wow.
Maybe going to do one of the other features is a video or just audio visit summary. You hand it, when the doctor's explaining to you what we're going to do. Hey, we're going to start chemo, and for fever increases, we'll stop it. So you can have that in there and then share it with other members of the care team who aren't there. So those are some of the features, and I'm fighting the notion of feature creep or the problem of feature creep. That was something I wanted to kind of ask y'all about. Like, how do, Maria, who I see is on the call, has been very helpful with that. But, I keep thinking of these things and I keep wanting to add stuff. How do you manage that? It's one of my biggest questions. Did you just pick a couple things and do it and see what happens?
That's a great question. I think that's a fundamental question of technology and building products, right? What are the core features or functionality that you want to release, and then you sort of introduce new things in a very iterative approach. I think it comes down to what are the in an MVP minimum viable product kind of way, what are the things that this thing must have in order for it to be useful, right? In order for it to provide utility. And then, being really rigorous about essentially putting things that, are ideas and they would be great, but putting those in, the icebox, so to speak. We'll put those on the roadmap, but let's get those core features, that core functionality right. And I think, you described you described sort of the scenario that, I would be kind of working towards here is, as you and your family or other users, as soon as if you have the app, but you're using other tools, as soon as you start to replace those text threads, with VHO, and you're starting to utilize the product in lieu of however you're doing it now, then it's starting to work, right? So focus on, getting those, those early traction points where this has more utility, more true utility to the group of users, the core group of, caregivers, and then add in things after that. But I think that level of focus is really difficult for founders or any product people. You're constantly going to have new ideas of things you can add in, and you really have to be sort of rigorous to keep those out until the core things you're working on are actually working and being adopted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to piggyback here. I love these shows. For example, anytime you get people in a room and there's ideas floating around. What was the question Jay asked? Like, when do I double down, or when do I pull the plug? Right? Like a very similar energetic question, Kip, is because it's like, let's look at this thing 4 years down the road or 5 years down the road. Maybe something changes in healthcare where things do become a little bit more available for everybody. Would this product be a brilliant product fit in a more maybe healthcare socialistic environment? Probably, right? There's gonna be a lot more responsibility put on the family and the caregivers in that circle than maybe the healthcare system. Picking the top 4 features that relieve the most mental anxiety was something that kind of came to me when we're sitting here, because for you, it probably wasn't necessarily the physical actions. It's really the mental stress of having to manage 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different apps, and then inside those apps, different text threads, and then trying to loop it all together. So it's really trying to ease the mental anxiety of already is emotional anxiety of a family or a loved one being sick, right? Mm-hmm. So there's like these different stacks that I think I see happening already inside the psyche of the person, which I find is really interesting. So you really have a really cool technology that if put in the right market and slowly released with 4 or 5 features that relieved maybe the most anxiety that you and your family have, and being okay with that. And then knowing that, I'm going to continue to develop this thing at whatever pace I choose to, or the market says to, is a really good place to sit. So I think it's probably one of those things we've talked about a little bit before in the past, Kip, is just awareness and easeability. So whatever the people who are trying to care give, like you, and be like, what's the easiest thing I can give 100 people to make their lives easier. I think that if you can make those features really clear, to me, that just feels really good. So that's my thoughts on that, man.
Kip, I know you have to run, so we'll give you an opportunity to escape in a second here. But I wanted to add on to Ryan's comment. I agree. Any family, we've been through this. I've been through this with my father, now almost 10 years ago, and he talked about, man, if there was just a technology that would help us sort of, this is a complex process in navigating this. And I think your patient and caregiver centric approach makes a lot of sense, because then you can work outside of really complex integrations into big software systems that are just going to be difficult to navigate. The other comment is, in a COVID world, we're seeing how difficult right now families, navigating the healthcare system without being able to see each other, right? I mean, that's heartbreaking and really challenging, and just being able to coordinate with each other when you can't see each other, which is a restriction that a lot of families have right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, great comments. You do have time for one last quick question. Do y'all have time?
Come on.
I read, and I forget the company. It was published in Atlanta Business Chronicle 4 or 5 years ago. It was some kind of hotshot young guys starting a company that was doing well. But
hey, Chris,
they were talking about, the last time I saw Chris in person, I had hair like his. But
took it.
They had this notion of just drive user adoption. We're trying to drive adoption. Don't worry about revenue. The revenue will take care of itself later. I'm obviously in this very early stage, and the answer is probably you have to do both. But what would y'all say to that?
That's a good question. Ryan, you want to take that? I'll weigh in too, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that kind of come to me. One is I for sure think that there is a season where you, and I don't know, maybe that's at a local level where you're able to partner with I love the testing as small, maybe like an outpatient surgery center where, it's not going to be long form care, but people that could come in, use it for maybe a short period of a recovery of somebody, like that gives you kind of like a ecosystem or a container that, there's kind of like a beginning and an end in the recovery process of an outpatient surgery center. Right. And I think like finding a way to test in that environment for free for an extended period of time, and then selling the value, not just to maybe groups of people, and that might have to come in a different form, whether that's, awareness inside of maybe some nursing circles or publicly, but also I think it'd be interesting is find a way to either maybe not license it, but in a way where like there's a big hospital system where, maybe a lot of these, I don't know if you as a physician, you would know better than me. Do you get tired of the family members asking you the same question over and over again? Or do you have a VA that's a nurse that's getting the same phone call, right? Like there's something really interesting in the space of like leveraging or taking away some of those micro moments, those times that you might have to take up as a physician or your PA or nurse, where a hospital, it could be an interesting play where a hospital is kind of like purchases it or uses it. And it's something that they promote to their customers. So I'm always looking for like, where's the end user? Who's going to really benefit from it? It's both going to be the family and a hospital potentially. So for me, I would say like, do it for free at first, get like a real cool opportunity, because you can really create some cool marketing around this. And then I would say from there, one is like, either you kind of do the personal monthly thing, right? Or you do kind of something where you're finding a partnership at a hospital where it's kind of like a lump sum licensing of the technology. I don't know if licensing is the right word. Maybe Chris can help me kind of figure out. But the thought I have is putting it in that market where you don't have to sell to 100 people. You could sell to one big person. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And you and I've talked about that a little bit back when we first started talking. That's helpful, and I thank you for it. And I would love to stay on. You can hear my phone ringing. It's because I'm going to pick my dad up to take him to the doctor.
Okay.
But, been very helpful, and I appreciate it. It was nice to hear from Ben, and see you guys essentially in person.
Yeah, likewise, Kip. Good to have you on today. We'll let you go because I know you've got obligations with your father, and hopefully we'll get a chance to have you back on and talk more.
I would love that. Thank you, guys. All right, take care.
Thanks very much. All right, I'll put up a couple comments. Kip won't be able to answer this, but we had some interesting thoughts here, and Lauren makes a good point about HIPAA. Fortunately, with FlatStack, we've had experience with HIPAA and medical products. It is complexity that you have to really make sure you're maintaining confidentiality. But that's a good point, and I think the opportunity to grow so that the doctor is potentially directly involved in VHO would be really cool.
Really cool. Mm-hmm.
Probably some HIPAA compliance components of that. But I like where Kip is coming from. From the standpoint of building a company, when it is rooted in personal experience of going through something, when it's rooted in, particularly for healthcare, when it's being designed and concepted by a healthcare professional, by a doctor, you sort of understand the landscape. I feel like things like this are really difficult to build when you're just a startup founder with an idea that is in a complex landscape like healthcare. So, I think he's coming from a really interesting place here.
Yeah, I think, it's I think one of the funny things about the creative space, I kind of lump creativity into online business or Ben, they're having to be creative, right? There's something really like this 2021 where there's this, we've always kind of seen creativity as like in the arts community, but man, this creative energy, trusting the creative things that are coming to you is really kind of entering into tech. It's entering into mainstream, is entering into online businesses. And so I think, for like Kip is like, get from 1 to 10, like you have your 1, then like get 10 users, right? And trust that thing that said, hey, go build this. And like, there's so much life in between that subtlety, that whisper of like trust and then creation, that it's easy to want to like pull the plug or double down. Right. So, man, if you kind of just hold that space between that thing that said, hey, you should go do this, because it didn't just come from nowhere. Like he had an idea because of a pain point, right? Like, so I love the idea, like just honoring the idea, like honor the idea that you like, man, I could really use this. If you had to shoot, man.
I agree, and I think back to the question that he had for us. He had to go, and I didn't get a chance to weigh in, but I'll share now, and maybe he'll get a chance to watch this. But I think that sometimes Silicon Valley and sort of the tech media does a tremendous disservice to the rest of the industry by, like the old, Reid Hoffman sort of blitz scaling,
Mm-hmm.
There's so much, we talked about SoftBank earlier with Ben, there's so much in sort of Silicon Valley zeitgeist that says, well, if it's not a unicorn, it's worthless, right? Yeah. And that is just, that might be true as a late stage VC, that you're not going to, make money on, a business that may or may not exit, or maybe a, good, 10, 50, $100 million business, but VCs may not be interested in that. But what happens with that is you get these, sort of programs, and it sounded like you went to maybe an accelerator program or a seminar or somebody, and there was a startup person that was saying, don't charge, no barriers, just user adoption. And that is that's like one model. And maybe if you're building a consumer product, and maybe if you're building something like Twitter, that you're trying to build a platform, but Kip could have a very successful company here charging, maybe after you get, like you said, adoption of 10 families using it, and they really are using it, you're like, hey, I'm going to charge $10 a month. And then, people value it and pay for it. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's certainly no one size fits all for how you should build a tech company, and a focus on revenue. Revenue is the best source of financing, right? Everybody focuses on how do I raise money from angels and VCs and everything, and just charging for what you're building and getting some people paying for it is pretty tremendous validation. So maybe not the first thing, I wouldn't build a Stripe integration and be building yet till you built your core features, but not being able to charge once people are actually using it, I think is something for him to keep in mind.
Well, I think it's maybe we can talk about this on the next show, but I love the conversation of money, because I think it, especially for Kip, right? Like the idea around charging, it's not about, is the app worth it? Is the technology worth it? Is the time worth it? It literally, I think in that situation could come down to like your marketing, your copywriting, and your invitation to help ease pain. That's pretty much like basics 101 for, what is it, free or not free? And I think even just like in the startup community, there's still some funkiness around like what actually is money. Like, have we seen the gold that backs up the $1 trillion COVID, bumped into the market? No, like we're printing it. And so I just think like the value of it's interesting to me. Like, what's the value? Like, should I not? And sometimes it just comes down to, hey man, this changed my life. This app, it can change yours. And then I think people don't think about the money. I don't. When like there's something I really need or really want and it solves something in my life, I honestly don't care. So I don't know. I think that's interesting. I love what you said there, Chris. That's a good call. He doesn't need to go, and have 500 adopters and, prove that it works, man. Like it works.
Yeah.
Full stop, as they say in England.
Right. All right. Well, I feel like we're at a good time there. This has been fun. Ryan, really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you to Ben and Kip for joining us. Thank you to Ariel and Lauren, our producers on the show. Thank you to everybody across the board, from the Flat Stack team to everybody else who's sort of tuned in today. Final thoughts, Ryan.
Final thoughts. Join a community, Launchpad maybe, and ask for help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're here to help. This was hopefully some of these nuggets.
There's two people at least, Ben and Kip. So we're gonna follow our own advice. We'll keep going.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, folks, and we will see you in a month for our next show of the year, and we'll be back at it.
All right. See y'all.
All right. So long.